Lazar ben Arach. Lazar ben Arach has quite a fascinating history. He's once again one of the famous students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, but he is also one of the more, so to speak, traumatic. Because what I want to show you something, if you look over here, for a second, if I show you the texts of the students of Rabbi Lazar ben Arach, of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he actually did a little bit of evaluation on all of them. And if you see, he said, the last one, this is Rabbi Lazar Omer. He asked him, what is the thing that comes away with? He said, Lazar. And he says, Ro'ani is Divrei Lazar ben Arach v'Divreichem, V'Kal Dvarav Divreichem. Anyway, that tells us that he considered, out of all his students, he seemed to hold Rabbi Lazar, this one that we're up to today, in the highest regard, to believe that they were all tremendously great students. But of the five, it seems as though he believed that Lazar ben Arach was the deepest and had the deepest understanding. As mentioned earlier, that each were, there's actually several stories in the Talmud where one time Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai loses a child and all these students try to comfort him and they say something which ends up, the one person says, you shouldn't be so upset because Job lost all of his 10 children. Now somebody else says, Avram Avinu had to sacrifice his son. And another one says, King David, David's son rebelled against him. And all these people, his reply to all of them was, it's interesting ideas, but you're not making me feel any comfort by telling me about the pain of others. And then when Rabbi Elazar came to comfort him, he said, God gives you a gift and a present, and you have to appreciate it. And thank God you got that present. God gives and takes, and you've done what God had wanted you to do to take care of that mission, that job that you had. I don't remember the exact details of all the wording that he said, but that was the general idea. And he said, you have fulfilled your mission with that child. You did what your job. The child is not an ownership. We don't own our children, but they are given to us for us to take care of them. And you've done exactly that. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, after hearing the words of Rabbi Elazar, he felt comforted. So there's numerous reasons to believe that out of all of these students, also, of course, if we go back to the beginning of this whole idea, it says, if all the students, all the wise people of the Jewish people were on one scale, Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, even the other student, Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, who some people thought was the greatest student of Rabbi Yochanan. Lazar ben Arach bekaf shniya, and Lazar ben Arach was on the second side, Machrias Kulam. So from that Mishna, it seems very clear that Rabbi Yochanan believed that the greatest scholar from amongst his students was Lazar ben Arach. Okay? But here's something quite incredible that happens. We've shown, and if you look through the Talmud, you'll see more of these stories of where you see that Rabbi Lazar ben Arach really stood out from the rest of his colleagues. He was really unique, and in his way of thinking. However, at one point, he decides to move away and to go to the place of Dimusis or something. I don't know exactly, Dimsus, which was like a holiday resort.
Mouth.
Sorry?
A mouth.
It was a what?
A mouth. The name, a mouth.
A mouth?
No, it was called a mouth.
Okay. So anyway, this place was, I'm not exactly sure of the term, but Noah tried to clarify it over there. But in this place, there was like therapeutic waters, and it was supposed to be like a real holiday resort place. And he felt that he studied, he'd been really successful, he trained, he taught. A mound. Is that what you're trying to say? No. Okay. Anyway, he'd been successful and he wanted to go on a little bit of a siesta with his wife. His wife convinced him it's time to take a break. He leaves his colleagues in the oven and they went. A mouse. Is that the name of the place? Okay, I think the name of the place that I have is Dumsis. Dumsis, but a mouse maybe is the English term.
Okay, yeah, I don't know, I don't remember.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a holiday resort with therapeutic waters somewhere in the land of Israel, is my understanding. While there, he really started to enjoy himself. The climate was different. People over there were relaxed. There was no pressure, no stress. It was a good, easy life. It was like the perfect retirement plan. And he started to enjoy himself. And he's at some point started thinking, maybe I should go back to my friends. I'm starting to miss my friends. But his wife convinced him, no, you stay here. Your friends must come find you. You were considered the greatest of Rabbi Yochanan's students. You were considered the greatest mind of the Jewish people. If they need you, you don't have to seek them. You don't need them, they need you, so to speak. That's what she convinced him. Anyway, to make a long story short, he ends up forgetting, slowly but surely, almost everything that he knew, which is really an incredibly sad story when you think of a person on his level of greatness and all the praises that his teacher had put upon him. Until eventually, when his colleagues decided that they actually did miss him and they wanted to check how he was doing, why he didn't return, they came to check on him and he was all excited to see them. And they started discussing ideas, trying to get some input from him, and they saw that he'd gone blank. He'd actually forgotten. He hadn't been practiced, he was rusty, and had forgotten a lot of his learning. And they were terribly distressed. It really bothered the fellow rabbis. Here was a man that was one of the greatest minds at the time, and simply by overindulging in materialistic pleasures and relaxation and lack of study and repetition had caused him to forget. And eventually they decided that they had to pray on his behalf, because to lose such a great Jewish mind would have been unbearable. So they prayed and prayed and prayed, and eventually he got his knowledge back, and he returns to Yavne. And that leads us into the conversation that we have. And that's why, as I say, they're the greatest. He's on one hand the greatest of the students, but on the other hand, unfortunately, he has a terrible downfall. He doesn't necessarily lose it, but he forgets his learning, which is a terrible thing. So with that in mind, let's actually look at his statements. We'll see that there's a connection between his actual story and his life. And as with Pirkei Avot, most of these ideas are connected to the statements that they actually say. Rabbi Lazar Omer, so we're up to number 14. He would say, first thing he says, Hafei shakud lilmod Torah. Be diligent in your Torah study. Diligent in your Torah study. Sorry, one second. Because he was extremely diligent, but he was given the title as the one that is the expounder. His colleague, for example, Rabbi Eliezer, he was known as the person that remembered every single detail. He was the expounder. So he would hear a teaching from his rabbis, from his teachers, and he would be able to expound upon it and explain it in a really logical way. But he said, when you're doing that, you have to be really diligent in the study of Torah and the study of your teachers, because if you're not careful, you could end up changing their words when you go into the concept of expounding. Of course, his colleague Rabbi Elazar was, for that reason, very careful not to do that. That's the first concept. The second thing is, when he was diligent, he was an incredible scholar, he always retained his knowledge. But when he stopped becoming diligent, when he stopped learning with the same fervor, But he probably still studied a bit. When he left his colleagues, what happened? He forgot everything. So that's the second point. So we're going to see later on in Pirkei Avot the importance of revising. And he believed, Rabbi Elazar, that his downfall was when he stopped revising and he stopped learning diligently. So you could gain a lot of knowledge. But if you don't continuously learn on a very high level, then you will eventually start to forget. Right? So that's the importance of diligent learning. Now, that's, I suppose, what's most connected to his story. The next point is what I wanted to discuss more in length, was this line. It says, Da masha toshiv la pikosis. No, to answer a heretic. I would like to talk about it a little bit more at length and get some input from you guys, if possible. But before I get, let's go a little bit further and then we'll revisit all this. The next point he says, V'da lifnei mi atamel, and also remember in front of who are you toiling? Mi hu bal malachtecha, sheyachshanem lecha schar perasecha. Know in front of who you are toiling, and who is the bal malachtecha, who is the owner of your work, who's the aunt, who's the one that's going to pay you. So let's start with this first line, Da masha tashav apikoros. And I'd like to get a little bit of input from you. What do you believe is the relevance of this teaching? So first of all, let's just clarify, just so everyone is on the same page, what is an apikoros? An apikoros is generally loosely translated as a non-believer. But there's lots of qualifications for that description of what it means, a non-believer. Some people will say it's the modern description of an atheist, while others would say that it's not really an atheist because Judaism does not necessarily believe in atheists in the classical sense. What does it say? So we're told the word atheist, apikoros, comes from the name of a Greek philosopher which sounded something like Epicurus or something like that. That was the name of the Greek philosopher. Am I saying it correctly? Okay. He founded the concept, or one of his strong teachings was that there is a creator or an original start of everything, but whoever that power is, they're not involved and not connected to the world. So there's no relationship with you and the creator. So that's that teaching, and people say that the name Epicurus came from that Greek philosopher. The second understanding of the word Epicurus is from the word hefker. Hefker means something which is worthless or something which is ownerless. People that consider the Torah to be hefker, ownerless or meaningless, they were called Epicurus. So in other words, it's not what we would call a traditional atheist, because a traditional atheist doesn't necessarily even believe in a creator. It's a person that would probably believe in a creator, but doesn't believe in the value of the Torah, or doesn't believe that God has a relationship with the world. And sometimes, we were told, the Talmud says, an Epicurus has to be somebody that he knows his master and purposely tries to rebel against him. But you have to start off with point number one. You first have to know your master. In other words, you have to have studied plenty of Torah first before you can become an Epicurus. You can't just get up one day and say, I'm a high school boy and I'm in year 8 and I'm an Epicurus. It sounds cool. I don't believe in God. I'm an Epicurus. It ain't that easy to be an Epicurus. An Epicurus generally would have to be somebody that is a serious scholar, has actually tried to study properly and put in the effort, and now he's used that knowledge or gained that knowledge, and now decides that he doesn't want to follow that tradition, that's an Epicurus. But for somebody to stand up one day and to say, well, I don't believe, that wouldn't be an atheist. That would be somebody that's just, hasn't done the research, hasn't done the thought process. Okay, so with that introduction of what Epicurus is, the line that we said in Pirkei Avot was, Da mashu tashiv la Epicurus, know what to answer the Epicurus. Well, what's the value of knowing what to answer this non-believer or this denier? What's the value of knowing? It seems like a straightforward concept, correct? Say something, no. What are you waving your head over there like that?
I don't know. She's free to go ahead.
Are we not supposed to care about each other and therefore spread as much knowledge as the other people are willing to absorb?
Sorry, I'm not understanding what you're saying. Could you explain that again?
Aren't we supposed to care about each other by sharing all the knowledge we have as much as the other people are happy to receive? Is that not our responsibility to share what we know? If you know Allah, share with other people?
Yeah, 100%. It is our responsibility to share our knowledge. But
So
there's a specific type of knowledge over here. Here he's saying that there's certain people will come up with questions or challenges. He's saying, Dam Masha Tashiv. He doesn't say, he says, know how to answer the Epicurus. There's a unique type of wording over here. Know how to answer. Is he saying that we should go around and trying to debate non-believers? Are we trying to disprove them and get into arguments, debates, and find a way to show that our path is the more logical, more correct path? Or just to have answers ready for them? What's the point?
Can I share a personal story here, which you may have heard? It goes back quite a few years. I don't think my daughter will mind me sharing this. Is one Friday afternoon where our daughter came to us and declared that she decided to become an atheist. And Jenny and I just said, okay, all right. But that night, she was still living at home, and every Friday night we do Kiddush. And before Kiddush, we bless the children. It's our custom. It is every Friday night, a minhag. So I looked at her and I said, do you want me to bless you? She said, yes. So I did. And during dinner, we said, we asked her, why, if you're an atheist, why did you still want me to bless you? And she said, oh, just in case I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's what they said, there's no atheists in a foxhole. But I think there's a lot of depth to that type of story, and of course we have it a lot. I have a guy a rabbi that once said that he was once approached by a man that unfortunately had lost his daughter in a train crash. And he asked, this man comes, and this man was a self-proclaimed atheist. And he says, Rabbi, tell me, why did it happen? He says, I'll tell you why it happened. Because the way that, the force of gravity works, that if something going at extremely powerful machine going at that speed knocks into a human being or whatever it is, it's going to cause that type of damage. That's what happens. A human being cannot survive that type of impact. This is no, Rabbi, why did it happen? He says, I don't understand. That's the way science works. Science works. Says, no, Rabbi, why did it happen? He said, I don't understand. Aren't you an atheist? You're asking questions of why? Atheists can't ask the question of why. They can only ask how, right? Why is a believer's question, right? And I think most people don't realize before they go on and say they're an atheist, it's really what a person is saying is, I don't want to have to believe. And of course, this is a generalization, and there's lots of layers to this. But in general, we say when a person says, I'm an atheist, they're saying, I want to try to live a life which is a godless life, which doesn't have to pertain to doing particular acts that would try to hint to the fact that there's a God in the world. But then once in a while, they'll do something. All these atheists that I know, self-proclaimed atheists, will do things that go against that belief. And they each will have their excuse why they have it. But ultimately, I don't think there's any true atheists, not in the Jewish people. They're all maybe they're antagonists, or sorry, not antagonists. They are, what's the word I'm looking for?
Agnostic.
Agnostics. Thank you. They're more like agnostics because they're just a bit confused. And you know what? The truth is that to a certain degree, I think we all are a bit agnostic at times, where we decide that even though we know God is watching and He's with us, but we decide not to allow Him to enter into our lives, or we say, God, just turn an eye away. Don't look at what I'm doing right now. Just don't pay attention. Or we know that God is with us, but we say, I'm depressed and I'm upset and I lose my faith, and allow my emotions to get the better of me, even knowing deep down that it's going to be okay. But that also, to a certain degree, goes against our very core belief, which is not an atheistic belief. But that's part of the challenges of what it means in this world. So what I'm saying is, I don't believe that anybody is truly an atheist, but there are layers of agnostics in the world. And to a certain degree, we all have that element, some of us more than others. Some live more true to our core belief and our core essence of God within us. But getting back to our topic and our discussion, the point over here is that it's great to learn Torah. It's really important to learn Torah, and that comes first. First, he says, be diligent in your Torah study. But don't study Torah only in a way that you're just learning the ideas, but also be able to nourish your belief, nourish your faith, that if you should be standing on strong ground, that when people do come to you with challenges and questions, you should be able to answer them. Now, unfortunately, I've seen too many times when somewhat basic questions in faith or in belief are asked to particular rabbis that sometimes are extremely knowledgeable, but when it comes to these particular ideas, they haven't thought about them, and then they get thrown off, and then the person thinks, oh, Judaism has no answers. And the point is, it's important for us to know that, for ourselves, to have that understanding. And some people don't need it, even if you don't need it for yourself, but you have to have the words. It's about having the words to be able to attach, to connect people to a belief system, to the belief in Torah. People will ask always all types of questions. And we think that, our generation, people must be, the most non-believing generation. I actually think that that's not necessarily true. I think possibly in previous generations it was different. We, in a generation where I think people see more clearly through science and through what occurs in the world, the handiwork of something of a greater being. It's just about us living in a different realm, a different time. So the question was, what does it mean to answer to the Apikoros? It means, do you have, he doesn't say go out, he says, do you have the knowledge within yourself? Could you go, and it doesn't mean that you should read Richard Dawkins, what is he called? The God Delusion, or whatever it is. Should we go and read those books? No, not necessarily. But should you be able to read the books like Maimonides and Kuzari and the Guide to the Perplexed and maybe Rabbi Jonathan Sachs books that explain the ideas that are there? Certainly. In other words, we have to have strong faith ourselves and the knowledge to answer this question, so that if our child does come up and have a discussion with us, will we be able to answer them? Will we have the words to answer them? Because sometimes we do know the answers, but we don't have the words. And he talks about the words. There's a topic in certain Jewish schools or Jewish seminaries, rabbinical seminaries, that they call Dama Latashiv, know what to answer. And it's about finding the right words of how to answer difficult questions. How do you answer the questions of God's existence, of who created God, of belief, of evolution, etc., God's involvement in the universe? All these questions, there are answers to them, and there are words. That's the important point. Okay, it's a concept that we're running out of time that we could certainly elaborate on a lot more. but I wanted to just at least try to finish discussing the rest of the Mishnah. That's okay. Anybody else wanted to add any other points connected to what we discussed over there?
Can I just apologize? I have to go.
No problem. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. It was not a lack of interest. I just have to go.
No, it's a prior. Thank you for joining for when you can. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Bye.
Okay. So he says now, know in front of who you are toiling. Now, this is important. It's connected to the previous point as well. Know in front of who you are toiling. In other words, when you're trying to do these studies or to answer the Pirkei as well, you can say, don't do it just for the sake of winning debates and coming out looking smarter. It's not about who wins the debate. It's not a debating competition. You shouldn't necessarily be even seeking out debates. The Rebbe, by the way, was not a fan of people attending debates and getting involved in debates. But he did want us to know what to answer. This is Pirkei Avot. But it says, if you know who you're standing in front of and who you're defending, you won't fall into the traps of the questions that people are asking for Pirkei. But also, when you know that you're serving God and not yourself, you're not just trying to come out as the smarter person, but you're also trying to serve a higher purpose. And you put in that effort, you will be successful. Who is the one, the owner, who is the employer that is going to pay you schar polasecha? Here's an interesting thing. It doesn't say that he's going to pay you for what you achieve. He will pay you for the effort. If you put in the effort, this is miyata amal. Who are you? Where are you? Who are you putting in the effort for? Right? And God pays you back for your labors, not for your outcomes, not for your achievements. You paid back for the effort. Did you try? Were you successful? You may think you weren't successful, but the reward is there for the effort. Your job is to put in the effort. The result is up to Hashem. The reward, in other words, God appreciates the effort, and whether you are successful enough or not, that is up to Hashem. Okay, so there's a few other points that I wanted to just mention over here that are connected to this line of Pirkei. Number one, it says over here, be careful when you are doing this. Jonathan Sachs has a brilliant article where he writes about the Jewish question. What is a Jewish question? Judaism, we encourage questions. We not only do we encourage questions, but we almost worship questions. We believe that questions are the answer, the way we reach truth. Without questions, you cannot reach truth, right? But that means that we encourage our students to ask, and we said, not, we're going to say later on, not the one that is embarrassed will learn, but only the one that's not embarrassed to ask questions. But at the same time, you have to know that there's different types of questions. There's a question that somebody questions you in order to know the answer, and that you have to have an answer for. But sometimes people are not asking a question for an answer. They're asking a question because they're trying to challenge and make trouble. Or sometimes people will put you in a debating scenario and they've already decided beforehand what they're trying to achieve. Public debates are very rare to actually convince people. Very rarely do people, is it Oxford University that always does those big debates and they call it the House Decides, or maybe it's Cambridge, I don't know. Hey Mark, good to see your face. They do these debates on topics, on hot topics, and the House decides. And I'm pretty sure that most people, if it's in Israel and the Palestinians, or God existence, not God existence, most people that go into those debates end up coming out on the same side that they left. Definitely the debaters. Sometimes you may change the mind of the listeners. And that's another point over here. That your job is to have the answers and answer the person But be aware, sometimes people are just trying to challenge and they're not going to be convinced. But at the same time, you have to know the answers for those that are listening, because if they hear the questions and they see that you don't have know what to answer, then they can be torn away and lost. And unfortunately, that's what happens. People get convinced unwittingly. Some people are not interested. They have a bias. They have a particular reason why they want to choose a particular path, and any logic won't convince them out of that. That's one point. And then there's other people that genuinely want to know a direction of how to go. And sometimes the point of knowing the answers is more important for those people than the ones actually asking the question. And last point is to remember that if you're involved, there's always going to be people and their biases. And if you're in a public debate, judges will be biased. So know that if you're judging, if you're going to a place where people are biased, try to avoid them. Historically, we know that over the years, Jewish rabbis and times were often asked to debate with priests. And it was a devastating, they tried to avoid it at all accounts because it was a devastating result whether they won or lost. If they lost, they would be force converted. And if they won, they would have to escape. The one that debated would have to escape and other people would be killed for losing. It's not as though anybody stopped believing in Christianity. It was there to try to win. And if they would win, they would force convert. And unfortunately, there was lots of stories. Most famous of all the debaters was in the previous halachot, we spoke about Rabbi Yeshua, who was the great defender of the Jewish people. But Nachmanides Ramban famously had several debates and he won them hands down. And it was also written, he wrote down the debates, and we still have it. It's called the Vikoch Haggadah or something like that. And he wrote down the thing, and there was actually BBC even made a film on that debate. But unfortunately, at the end of the debate, his life was at risk. He had to escape for winning the debate, and that was the story throughout the ages. That winning a debate was not necessarily the best result, and certainly losing was not the best result. The best result that Jewish people could have had most of the time was actually not entering the debate at all. Just to conclude with a little quick story of this town that was once called to bring somebody up to debate. There was a unfortunately a converso Jew, a Jew that had converted out of Christianity, that had become a big priest, and he wanted to call the leaders of the community, the mayor and the leader, and he said, I'm going to make a debate, and we're going to debate against, and then it was a town of simple Jews. There was nobody of tremendous knowledge over there. And he believed he knew more than all of them. So he was going to get the Jews to give this debate, and they will win, and then we'll force convert the Jews. Anyway, the Jews are told that they have to appoint somebody to debate this fellow, and if they don't, they will be exiled from the city. They don't know what to do. Nobody knows who could really debate this type of guy. They didn't have any great rabbis in the town. Eventually, one simple guy in the town says, I'll do the debate. Anyway, the day comes, the debate is in front of everybody, and he says, okay, you're a simple Jew. I'll give you the opportunity to ask the first question. So he says, tell me, my friend, what does ani lo yodea mean? So the guy says, I don't know. He says, you see, you don't even have the answer to our questions. And it's my son Yitzchak loves this story, but Noach's probably heard it many times from Yitzchak. But sometimes the best answer is I don't know. But what Rabbi Elazar is telling us, that's not a good enough answer. We should know. We should learn. And if we don't know, it's time to start learning. So if your children are asking you questions or your friends are asking you questions, and you feel like they have a good point and you don't know the answers, says Rabbi Elazar, it's time to start learning. But Dam al Tashav, he says it's an obligation for us to know how to answer. And if you don't know the answer, somebody else will know the answer. If the next person doesn't know the answer, somebody else will. But Judaism believes there is an answer to everything. All right, we'll stop there. Thanks for joining. If anybody has any other questions or points, you're welcome to ask.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. See you.
Okay, have a good day. Bye.